Ignazio Alboré, Second Democracy. The Political Induction of Value, Chapter 8, Part 3. The theory defines value as an individual utility that derives from a good. A change in utility preferences toward a good determines a change in its value. I believe, instead, that it is a political utility that determines value, not a subjective one. Before individuals, politics, the state, trade unions, business organizations, monopolies, supranational bodies determine preliminarily the political social utility of goods, determining their politically and socially sustainable value. In this way, state values also determine personal preferences and perception of shortage, directing them completely. Preferences and shortage, in fact, signal a value already directed by state values. They influence prices because, in the short term, everything is scarce, because it cannot be reproduced. But this shortage does not determine value. Before it can do so, value has already been largely decided and directed by state values and organized values. State values or organized values cause the consumer's basket to be composed of certain goods that I call addressed, and not others that I call alternatives. The alternative ones are forced to suffer crowd out, they are put out of the market, not able to be preferred. When a good becomes necessary for many citizens, the state protects it, regulates it, taxes it, and modifies its value. The bureaucratic and strategic choices behind the state values pre-exist with respect to the manifestation of the effects of preferences and shortage on value. Except when the need for a good arises in the social group, at that moment, in fact, its value depends on preferences and shortage. By determining the value of the addressed goods, the value of goods that, with respect to the addressed goods, are indirectly determined, identical, substitutes, instrumental, complementary, competing in the offer, with a joint offer, in a relative relationship. Practically, all goods. In fact, I believe that the distortion of relative prices by state values also indirectly determines the value of most other goods. I call this mechanism the J-effect, indirect induction of value. States and organized power regulate, tax and subsidize all key sectors, and through them also key goods. By controlling spending, taxes, issuance and cost of money, collective bargaining, civil servants, and by regulating and subsidizing fossil and renewable energy sources, agriculture, automobiles, construction, trade, transportation, steel, weapons, health services, they determine, directly and indirectly, the value of all goods. In fact, even goods that are not addressed by state values, or goods that are not directly influenced by key sectors, simply because they have not been chosen, are equally subject to an indirect determination by state values of their value, through relative prices. When state values cause the total crowd out of a good, putting it out of the market, the political induction of value operated through relative prices is total because it determines its entire value, and personal preferences will not even partially influence the determination of value. When the distortion of relative prices by state values changes from a momentary phenomenon to a systematic, planned one, the distortion of relative prices transforms into a determination of value. The distortion neutralizes the free expression of prices as scarcity indicators, even before prices are determined. A systematic price distortion is a determination of value. This is also since the action of state values produces a distortion of the marginal rate of substitution between goods. State values determine a large part of the value of a good, because within the latter as many state values are added and stratified as there are tools activated. On some goods certain tools are added to others, others are added, on some goods some more, on others some less, on some favorable tools impact, on others unfavorable tools. It is therefore an algebraic sum of favorable tools and unfavorable tools. If there is a disparity in the application of state values between identical, substitute, competing goods in the offer, in a relationship of relativity, it will be precisely that disparity that will decisively form the value. The good that has a greater sum of favorable state values will exert the J-effect on the other, indirectly determining the value of the other good. As regards goods with a foreign market, an international disparity is added to a national disparity due to the difference in state values between countries on a good. The more competitive a market is, the more homogeneous, substitute or competing goods competing for the market have similar utility and shortage among themselves, therefore, the disparity of state values becomes decisive for the formation of their value. Given equal utility and shortage, it is the quantity, quality and sign favorable or unfavorable, the state values that give them more or less value and therefore make the goods more or less competitive. A good with an unfavorable algebraic sum of state values, which competes on the market with a good whose algebraic sum of state values is favorable, will be able to maintain a price similar to that of its competitor only for a relatively short period, because then its price will have to settle at a level corresponding to the value of the good, precisely that value strongly influenced by a negative algebraic sum of state values. If it did not do so, it would have no profit margins. It will therefore have to increase the price. Then there is the return political induction, between goods that compete for the market, measures of spending, subsidies, transfers, taxation, regulation, protection, etc. are eliminated for some and preserved for others. This contributes to greatly extending the duration of a value induction, which in many cases becomes perennial. Calculation of the overall political induction of value on a certain good A. 1. At the individual tools of the state values applied on good A, E.G regulation plus subsidies plus taxes. 2. At the individual tools of the state values applied to a possible good B, which is, with respect to A, identical, substitute and competitor. 3. Calculate the difference between the sum of the tools of the state values of A and the sum of the tools of the state values of B. 4. At the individual tools of the state values applied to a possible good C, present in a foreign market, which is, with respect to A, identical, or substitute, or competitor. 5. Calculate the difference between the sum of the tools of the state values between good A and the sum of the tools of the state values of C. 6. Calculate the algebraic sum of the return political induction tools among the above goods.